Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Beers.
And I'm author and writing coach Nikki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Thank you for being with us. We're glad to have you. We have Jamie Dalton, a YA fantasy author, with us today, and we are so happy to have her. Stephanie, can you tell us about Jamie?
I would be happy to. Jamie Dalton is an author of YA fantasy. Growing up in Oregon and Idaho, she fell in love with the magic and mystery of the forests and history. And after moving to North Carolina with her husband, her sass took on a life of its own. Sassy, magical fantasy stories began to be written. She fell in love with the publishing world and became a book cover designer as well as an author, which she does during the night while her toddler sleeps. I don't know how you do that.
I joke I'm a vampire.
So how does that work? You write when your toddler sleeps? What is your typical writing routine like, Jamie?
So it's kind of shifted over time. I started all this when my daughter was 6 months old.
Okay.
And so when you're dealing with a baby, you're literally just getting every single snippet of time you can. And then when she became a toddler, I really had to partner with my husband, which it took a few years for him to really see my publishing as something more than a hobby. So getting that help took time. I had to actually be able to show I was making money before I got that help, which is very common.
Sure.
But yeah, so that I was still doing naps. Fortunately, naps were longer. And I am not a morning person. So I'm not the one who can get up an hour or 2 hours before my family wakes up. That's not going to happen. I tried, and my muse is just gone. She does not exist in the morning.
No. She hasn't woken up yet.
No. So I stay up a little bit after they go to bed. I tuck in the husband, tuck in the kid, and I stay up and write or work on marketing. And then this year, my daughter just started kindergarten, and I feel so spoiled that I'm getting these chunks when I can get so much done. But it's actually been really good because I've been able to start dividing my time to where when she's in school, that is mommy's work time for the most part. And when she's out of school, I'm really getting to spend more time with my family because as my author business has grown, my demands are getting a lot bigger and I'm having to have a team and I'm having to do all of this stuff. And setting those boundaries has been so important.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure.
Jamie, I love how you said things don't happen in the morning, they happen at night for you, because from myself and probably a lot of you out there, we struggle with when is the best time we're creative, and sometimes it's it should be this time, and then we might fight the natural thing. And I love that you know it and you own it and you live it. So that's inspiring. So thanks for sharing that. So how do you balance your creative energy with the parenting demands? And do you have any strategies for staying productive in your writing and working?
I have also found I am not someone who could do short, I need at least an hour or two because my brain, when you're not in a creative field, it's very hard sometimes to realize that when you are creative, it's not a clock in, clock out job. So it takes time to get your world to set back in. I joke that I'm a mood writer and a mood reader. So I have to actually set the mood. Otherwise, books never get finished. So that has turned into sometimes I have local coffee shops and I go to different ones depending on what scene I need to be writing because of the vibes they do or the drinks they do or the food they do. I turn on music. I'll like candles. I'm very sensory, which I do for my readers as well. So it all works out great. But figuring out that I was a mood writer was a big part of unlocking being able to get into that setting faster. And then learning how to optimize my time without guilt was very hard, especially because I had to retire my cover design because my author stuff took off so much. But I still run sets with other authors. I still do PR for other authors. And when you're indie, you are a business. You have to have time that is for social media, that's for looking at the finances, that's for formatting your book, for creating ads, checking your ads. It's so much time. The more books you put out there, really the less time you have to write, which is really disheartening sometimes. And again, part of why I'm having to now start spending the money on A Team. But something that really helped me is because my time is getting shorter, when I'm stuck during my like designated writing time, I Google typing speed games and I let my brain just play around with the story wherever I'm stuck with whatever while I'm practicing my typing speed because I don't have to think about what my fingers are doing. And so I can type now if I have 8 hours. Normally, right now, my schedule is that like Mondays, I get 6 to 8 hours. And sometimes my brain craps out on me in that and I can't get a full 6 to 8 hours. But that is the only time I get to write in the entire week right now. And in that time period, because I have spent so much time typing, if my brain is flowing with me, I can write 10 to 15,000 words in one day. So it's okay to only write one day a week and sometimes to only write 2 or 3 times a month because I'm able to do that because I have worked so hard on getting my typing speed up. And if it's a day that I only got 500 words done, I've still increased my typing speed and none of it's been wasted. I've been able to prepare myself for future days. And that's been such a game changer as well.
That's amazing. I never thought about doing that. I guess when I was first writing my first book is when I actually taught myself to type. I like forced myself to not look at the keypad, and I was writing my first book and I would do that because I used to type, like
Oh,
heck,
the chicken.
little chicken scratching.
Yeah, typing is a game changer for sure.
It really is. But yeah, that's definitely a skill that everybody needs when they're a writer. I loved what you said. I actually just had a conversation with one of my interns about the fact that I might start taking like every other Friday or something and just write for myself. Just use an entire day because I usually write an hour a day and I feel like by the end of the hour, I'm like just getting really into it and then I have to quit. And that is the most frustrating thing every single day.
I actually did serial writing for a while and for a couple of years, and it was amazing money. But I found my brain really struggles with having that fast of a turnaround and like having to have things ready without it being completed because I'm a pantser.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to go back and change things. And I also found that writing every day actually sends me into burnout very quickly, even if it's only a few words. So I do much better with just one day and that's it.
I have known a few serial writers who worked for places like Radish Fiction, and burnout is super, super high. I knew somebody who worked for them for 3 years, and after that time, they couldn't write for 3 years. They were so burned out, they just didn't even want to do it.
That's so sad.
So yeah,
That's not good. So tell me a little bit about, you're talking about that your work has gotten to the place now that you need a team, and that's how you're finding more time to write and everything. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're organizing and how you came to figure this out for your next stage in writing?
Yeah.
And what are the members of your team? I'm
Yes.
curious about that.
All of that. I want to know all about it.
One of the biggest like keys that I needed to unlock was that I didn't necessarily have to hire somebody full time. And then I didn't necessarily have to hire somebody from a company, which was weird for me to think about. When you think about having a personal assistant, you're like, oh yeah, I need to be able to afford to pay them at least 20 hours a week. I can't afford that, so I can't afford help. But there's so many people, especially readers, and especially like I found college readers or moms who just are looking for something a couple hours a week that they can do at home. Or I have one person right now who's coming to my house, and I call myself a reader first author. If my experience so far has been that if I focus on the reader's experience, that the money comes to me, which is like such a weird mindset because a lot of times we think sales, 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 and when you focus on sales, it scares readers off. So I've focused a lot on the reader's experience. So for example, like my books, I put recipes of whatever they were eating or drinking. I'll put the recipe in the back of the book so that people can tactilely experience that moment from the book, which is really fun because then readers will do it and they like make it, or they go get, one of them right now is a white chocolate lavender latte from my biggest book. And a lot of coffee shops can make that. So like I get tagged by readers all the time going, getting this drink, and they're so excited.
Cool.
And then also just like creating special editions for them. There's companies like Book Vault that let you print one at a time. And while the profit margin is lower for me, it lets me like do a whole, I'm printing this exclusively for you.
Yeah.
And I've found that if I create these experiences, especially if I'm focusing on physical experiences of some sort of theirs, creating a visual hook, that it turns into ebook sales because they go check that out first. And then they pay me twice because then they come back and they want signed copies. They want that book box. They want the pretty things. They want all of these extra things. And that can be hard and intimidating. I will say that. But my first person I hired was a virtual PA.
Mhm.
And for her, she's been a lot of things with me. She actually has been with me since my cover design days, but I only pay her for 10 hours a month. She doesn't want more than that. She's got a full-time job. She's a mom. She's not looking for more than that. She just wanted to be in the author world, and that was it. So she's done stuff from finding stock photos for me for ads to doing social media posts for me where she creates it out of B-roll videos that we have. And I give her the text and I'm like, you put it together, you throw it in this folder, and I will use it. She also helps me run events and help me handle my ARC readers and a lot of stuff because I found I love creating these experiences, but I do much better in a sprint than in a marathon with them. I could create
Mhm.
something high energy and then I need to socially recharge and I can't keep
Yeah.
it up like long term. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So she helps me with that. I have some people that I hire like once a year for updating, which I need to hire again, for updating like back matter and front matter in my books, because that is so intimidating to have to keep updating, especially when you publish more than one book a year and your backlist is getting bigger. You have to do it for more and more books every year, and it feels like a lot. So there's a lot of the like management jobs that you can ask. And then because I've been doing so many in-person things, like in-person selling direct books and that kind of things, anywhere that distributes takes such a massive chunk of the profit from authors that, for example, if I sell one special edition of a book, it right now for Cursed by Gold is costing me around $46 to print the book and ship it to me because it has to be printed from the UK. And that's if I order just one. It's cheaper if I buy more. But if I order just one, it costs me 46. I'm selling it for 65. That $19 is huge compared to the $1 to $3 per book I'm making anywhere else. So it's worth the time. So I did just hire somebody, and I'm about to have to add on a second person. I did just hire somebody who comes one day a week for a couple hours, and we pack up all of my orders and ship them out. But I'm about to have to hire someone for the middle of the week too, so that we can just like bounce back and forth between them. But look at the things that you freeze mentally on. Everyone has their own strengths. I love marketing. I love the face to face. I love the experiences. And I still want to do those, but I needed help with those. But for someone who isn't good at that, that would be the place to look for someone to hire. But I also always suggest to learn how to do it yourself first, because especially if you're on a really tight budget, it's a fantastic way to hire a PA, a personal assistant who's virtual, who is just a reader, who's just needing some extra money, and make sure that you're getting one that's their strength. You need to be able to actually evaluate if you're getting the value from them. So you need to know how it
Sure.
works and how to do it before you hire somebody and train them how to do it for you. 'Cause no two ways are going to be the same. So even if they've taken the same course you have, they're going to view it totally different. And it's not necessarily going to produce the right things for your brand and how you want to represent yourself to your audience. So you have to really think about that. Unfortunately, I love
Mhm.
doing all of that. So it's not hard, but it could be intimidating.
Lots of moving pieces there.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about your cover designing? I know you mentioned that
not?
you're not really doing that anymore.
It actually is how I learned how to publish.
Okay.
Nice.
So, Jamie, as an indie author and cover designer, woman of many hats,
Yeah.
what's your process for ensuring your covers appeal to your target audience?
So I talk about tropes as the author's superpower because literally every single part of publishing can be broken down into tropes. Cover design is really what taught me that, because the trick to having a marketable book is creating something that uses the tropes in a new, twisted, fun way. So it lets readers subconsciously, emotionally connect with it. without feeling like you're selling them. So covers, for example, if you see a book that is, for example, right now it's very popular to have cartoons on rom-coms. And
Yes.
people will add, if they're adding on swords and teacups, you're like, that's probably going to be a cozy fantasy rom-com. But then if you see a cover that is high contrast darks with like pops of neon, you're probably looking at something that's sci-fi or dystopian. But dystopian is normally more gritty. It's hard for a lot of authors to really see who their actual target audience is. And most authors do not write something that fits perfectly into just one genre. So
Yeah.
a lot of times when it comes to covers, the same rules for covers work really well to be able to have strong branding for ads, to know that you're hitting the right audience on your social media posts. And honestly, the biggest mistake that I see authors make are the wrong
Yes.
fonts.
Mm,
Yes.
Yes, like that is the
Oh, sorry.
biggest. No, it's true though. It is the biggest mistake I see authors make, and it's so often because they like the font, and I'm like, but
right.
that's the wrong audience
Right.
entirely, or it
Right.
makes you look outdated and DIY. That's the one thing I wish authors would
Sorry.
really
Sorry.
do.
I'm a huge thriller fan, and like sometimes if the font is not doing it, I'm like, what's happening here? It makes me not want to pick it up, even though I'm sure it's a fabulous book.
Yes.
And I know the same's with romance and sci-fi and fantasy, and it's fascinating what, like you said, the subliminal messages you're telling by images.
Yeah, and like you
Hmm.
just said, it will completely make or break if someone will even give your book a chance. It doesn't matter if you get picked up by the biggest of publishers with the biggest deal. If it has the wrong fonts, and even if you're posting on social media and you're hoping to boost your book on social media and you're using the wrong fonts, you're scaring off your audience. It can make it so your book is not doing as well because they're never going to get to where you show the cover. They're just going to scroll right past, which is really disheartening, but it's so important. And honestly, publishing in general, most things can be broken down into tropes. It's actually why I decided to give publishing a chance. It's because I was dealing with postpartum depression and I hadn't read for years. And I was like, I just feel like I need to escape my world. And I remembered that when I read, it turns into a movie in my head. And I was like, I want to try. And I stumbled on a book, When Wishes Bleed by Casey L. Bond. And it's like dystopian meets The Bachelor with witches. It's great. And
Love it.
I was like
What a fit.
obsessed. And then I was like, who published this? And I went and I was like, this is self published, but it's done at such a high quality level. It looks traditional. I would have never guessed. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start in cover design because I like art. I was like, I'm going to learn how to publish. I'm going to learn how to market while I write this book. I was like, I can't afford editing. I can't afford to hire anybody. So I'm going to learn these skills and save up the money while I do it. And like, I'm going to start publishing at a traditional level so that people don't even second guess if I should do it, which it's worked very well so far.
Great goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, have you had a cover that's flopped or needed to rebrand, or do you change covers to improve sales?
I have not, partially
Mhm.
because I like to lean into evergreen but marketable, especially
Mhm.
if I'm going, and it's easier when you're in fantasy and to a degree paranormal romance. Like my audience has
Okay.
shifted a little bit, but I have worked with a lot of clients that I have redone their covers and they've seen a huge jump in sales suddenly. And a lot of the times it's, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking pre-mades. I've sold a ton of pre-mades. I've bought pre-mades. But I've seen a lot of people who have DIY'd their covers to the point where it looks DIY and they're like, why can I get sales? And I'm like, because it looks low quality. So even if your book is the best edited thing in the world with the
Yeah.
best blurb, ads are looking great. As soon as they see the cover, they go, oh, this is probably going to be really low quality. And they're not going to give it a shot. They're not going to even read the blurb. So
Hmm.
I've worked with a lot of authors that I have completely changed their covers, redone everything, and they've seen a huge jump. And then also, I love that it's becoming more popular in the author community that your book does not have to have just one cover. I love that so much. And I love that you don't necessarily have to completely reprint a book to get a new cover on it. There's a lot of places where you can actually just order the dust jacket and you swap out the dust jacket. And fun fact, paperbacks can get dust jackets too. I have a lot of clients actually, because I still have friends that like I give them covers. I have a rule: like, if I
Okay.
give you this cover, there's no changes. I don't care if you use it. No changes allowed. But I have a lot of friends and a lot of clients that we will do in-person only book covers, and we'll have dust jackets that are just for in-person things, and that's the only way a reader can get that from us, is at an in-person event.
Smart.
Or we'll have book box exclusive ones, and we can use the same book, we just put on a different dust jacket. But we don't sell the dust jackets exclusively. Some people can, and if you want to, that's great. They're just a pain to ship and worry about getting damaged because they're so thin. So
Right.
Yeah.
I don't, but I like that you can play around with that and you're not stuck with just one, which our book has a lifetime. The cover market is going to change constantly. So that's worth doing, definitely.
What are some resources, since you're self-taught, what are some resources you recommend for people when wanting to learn about marketing and tropes and like the fonts and covers and just all that? Because even if you're traditionally published, you're still your own marketer,
Yeah.
whether you want to believe it or not. Marketing departments and PR are great, but you are not their only author, right? So what would you recommend?
YouTube has a ton of amazing tutorials. Also, honestly,
Mm.
if you just Google, there's a lot of places. You just have to know what you're asking. So if you're a fantasy author and you're trying to figure out fonts, Google best free fantasy fonts. I always say to make sure to look at that it has commercial rights. Most things do not have commercial rights, or you have to pay extra for. So that is something we have to make sure we take into account, and making sure it's not something that is copywritten to someone else. So like avoiding anything dealing with
Mm.
celebrities. Honestly, a lot of the like really pretty castles are underneath historical preservation stuff. So you're not allowed to use them even in your own marketing.
Sure.
The Eiffel Tower, the light show at night, you're not allowed to use. That is actually a copywritten light art piece. So you need to dig a little bit. Also, I, along with two other way more impressive and way more experienced authors than I am, run a not for profit author resource. It's called Evergreen Author Resources. And like right now, we just put up a 7-day crash course of how to do Kickstarter with like start to finish. And we're putting out consistently new resources to help people learn stuff. I lean more into the marketing, how to get your books to sell, that kind of side, and like the cover side. We've got a lot of stuff planned for that. But then my partners, one of them she is Dr. Tanya Nagel, and she's a creative writing professor who's been published for like more than 25 years. So all of her stuff that comes out is how to write better. So we all lean in with each other. But also sometimes just going and learning, looking at artists. A lot of artists and a lot of cover designers will have behind the scenes and like tutorials and that kind of thing. If you go and you follow them, especially on their social medias like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, a lot of times they'll do the behind the scenes to try and get the views and build that credibility with authors. So the authors go, I want to hire you. You obviously know your stuff. So definitely go and follow them, especially the ones that you like. But make sure to do a little market research yourself to make sure you're following ones that are actually right. And when you're doing that, make sure to look at books that either have had their covers changed or have released in the last 2 to 3 years. I prefer 1 to 2, but some are good at evergreen covers. Some markets change like every 6 months to a year on what their covers look like.
That's great. Thank you. And we'll have those resources in the show notes, people. So don't, as you're driving, don't freak out.
Yes.
10 and 2, 10 and 2, eyes on the road.
You have really done a good job with that.
When you're marketing your books, do you rely on specific kinds of ads or certain ads? Do you rely a lot? It sounds like you do a lot of social media engagement. Do you do newsletters? Do you do anything else? Can you just enlighten us a bit on
Yes.
how you
So
market?
I admit my newsletter, I am very wimpy on. They basically just find out about releases because I got overwhelmed with, again, with the consistent. It was burning me out and giving me anxiety. So they mostly find out when I've got a free book up or when I have a new release. But when I do, I like to make sure that I'm putting in something of a personal connection. So like I'll put other book recs and sometimes I'll swap with friends as like free marketing with each other. Everything I have found for the most part It doesn't matter if it's a social media post, it doesn't matter if it's an ad. Like Amazon, a lot of times you get just a hook. That's it. And your cover. Facebook, you get to play around more, but wherever it is, it needs to connect emotionally with the reader immediately. And it needs to give the stakes. It needs to hook with them emotionally as a reader, and it needs to introduce some sort of tension or stakes so that they're like, I need to know more about this.
Yeah.
And everything turns into that. If you're buying your art for a cover, it needs to have a specific composition, and a scene itself normally does not work. But a scene itself, especially a high emotion scene, is amazing to do for ads and to use on social media and that kind of thing, because that will emotionally hit them. But when you're dealing with covers, most people are seeing it in black and white and a little teeny tiny like stamp size, and they can't see all of that. So it has to be the right thing. And especially since they're scrolling so fast. That's why they talk about like the triangle or having a heavy top or heavy bottom and high contrast so you can actually see it. But visually, your eye stops somewhere on it, like it snags, because otherwise their eyes just smooth right over it to the next one. But you don't have to worry about that when you're creating art and like you're getting stuff for ads and social media. You don't have to worry about that. It's nice.
Wow.
You've got so much information that I just wouldn't even think about. And it sounds like you
Yeah.
have like an organic fan base growth, but also paid. How do you balance that? How do you build it naturally?
Visual hooks. For
Okay.
example, my biggest book, I've sold over 200,000 copies of in about a little over a year. I think I'm like a year and a half probably now. I'm sitting around 250,000 copies of it. And it's really funny because my biggest marketing thing on it, people show for free for me all the time. And it was free for me to do. It just took hours. And it's that there's a little bee that I formatted in, and I had to move it 4 pixels for hundreds of pages and put it on all of these pages so that when they flip the pages, the bee flies. And
Oh,
having
wow.
a visual hook of some sort, like I've got another one that's a special edition that has black paper, and I'm almost sold out of all of them. We have to do another order, but people are like, I love reading in night mode. I want black paper. Just creating something that's
Wow.
extra, especially something that's extra and above what they can get in a bookstore right now, especially because in a bookstore, they're getting what feels like a special edition with foil and edges,
Mhm.
but in and for like half of the price of what an indie can sell it for. So as indies, and don't get me wrong, trad as well, but especially as indies, you really need to create a visual hook of some sort
Mhm.
that will make you stand out and make them go, do you remember that one book? That's
What
what
books are the bee and the black pages?
Yes.
the
Tell
bee
tell us. We need to
Come
know.
on, shameless self-promotion. Let's hear it, Jamie.
the bee is bound by honey, and it is like a
Okay.
pure cozy fantasy, super cozy. And then the other one is How to Be a Good Villain. It's a
Mm.
cozy adjacent fantasy rom-com, and it's a standalone, but it's in a series of like female villain cozy fantasy rom-coms. And the other one is How to Dump a Vampire, and that's about to get black pages too. When I decided to mature up with my audience, because I saw that YA was getting really hard to sell, but I
Mhm.
didn't want to walk away from my Fade to Black YA audience, and I wanted to still stay
Yeah.
on the lighter side. My mental health cannot handle being a dark writer. I can dabble with a
Yeah.
few dark things, but I can't be a dark writer. And
Mhm.
so I did a Kickstarter, actually, my first Kickstarter, because I wanted to see if I wanted to move my book boxes to Kickstarter. And I did How to Be a Good Villain. And I was like, that sounds like the perfect book for Black Pages. But I decided to use it as like a data thing because I love data. And I let people get a hero edition that had a different underneath dust jacket, different colored case laminate, slightly different art, and white pages with black ink. And then the villain edition had the black pages, different colored case laminate, and different art on the reversible dust jacket. And then I was like, I want to test how much of my audience wants to upgrade. I shouldn't say upgrade. Means it's bad. I don't mean that. But wanted to progress with me into spice. I
Yeah.
wanted to see if I added sweet spice, was I going to be scaring off my audience, or was it going to be a good move? So all of my books, all of my versions of that, I also offered in both Fade to Black and Sweet Spice. And I found that I was about 30% Fade to Black and 70% Sweet Spice. And ever since then, all of my books that I've published, if it has spice in it, the physical copies everywhere, because it only cost me an ISBN number, the physical copies everywhere have both Fade to Black and Sweet Spice options available, which has been great because I get picked up by a ton of book clubs, a ton of groups, and parents and children reading my stories together because they're able to get every
Yeah.
like preferences, which has been a lot of fun actually.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Amazing. What a great idea.
I know. I hadn't even thought about that. That's really neat.
So, what's one marketing mistake you made early on that you wish other indie authors knew?
I would say my biggest mistake that I made, I've had problems that I'm still dealing with from companies I've worked with that made big mistakes that I'm still trying to get worked out. But my biggest mistake that I made was actually on my very first book. And it's because I thought there was such a thing as a perfect book. And so I overworked my book to where when I sent out advanced copies really early, and I was getting messages going, "This is the worst book I've ever read. It's so boring." And it's because I had overworked it to what everybody said the perfect book was. And I was very lucky that even though I had paid 2 editors to help me get it like as good as I could, I had an editor friend and I messaged her and she calls me and I'm bawling and I'm like, I don't know what to do. She's like, send me everything you deleted. And she added so much in and it added the magic back in. And
Mhm.
that was the moment that I learned that, and I had heard people say it, but it was really the moment that I learned that your writing style, your voice is really the within boundaries, the like ways that you play with and break the writing rules. And that really helped. And then also at that same time, I really had to come to terms with the fact that there's no book everybody's going to love. And not everybody's my target audience. And that's okay. Like I had to be okay with that. And that's so hard sometimes mentally. But it really does help be able to like process the bad reviews when they come in. And most of the time, you can tell if they were not your target audience when it comes in. And you're like, I don't know how you decided my book was the one to read, but okay. But then also, a couple books later, I had to relearn that lesson a bit when I released Bound by Honey, because when I released that book, the first 100 reviews that came in, it went viral enough before it even released that only 2 or 3 out of the first 100 reviews were above a 2 star. And that was because they loved the idea of cozy fantasy, but they had no idea what cozy fantasy was. Like they were hoping for really high stakes still. And I'm like, that's not cozy fantasy. Now, don't be wrong, it totally bounced back and it felt amazing as it slowly bounced back and as it's found its audience. But it was such a gut punch. And especially because my brand and what I publish now is very much in the fantasy or paranormal rom com area. And a lot of people, when they on social media, you see them and they talk about their review scaling for rom coms. And a lot of people say they will never review a rom com above a 3 or 4 star. Like it's impossible for them to be a 5 star because for them, a rom com is their reset book and it does the
Hmm.
job at the moment and they love it, but then they don't think about it again later. Um, I have my group of readers who do think about it and they buy all the extras and they love it. But I had to learn to be okay with those extra people who I was going to sit in that bubble with. And I had to be okay with the fact that my rom com books, I'm going to be sitting at probably 3.8, 3.9 because of this mentality instead of sitting above a 4, which makes it harder to market because Amazon does not push books below a 4 star at all. Even if you're paying ads, you have to pay really high dollar amounts for Amazon to decide to pick you. So it definitely made me do some major thinking of how am I going to do marketing? How can I twist this so that I can do it with all this stuff working against me and still write what I want to write and make sure I'm hitting the right readers, which it works. I make a full time income from it, but it's been a
That's
learning
interesting.
curve.
Yeah, for
It is.
sure.
Yeah. And it's just kind of really your business acumen that you have to have with being an author too. That authorpreneur is really what you're doing.
Yeah, like how do you stay organized?
Yeah.
I feel
What?
like there's so many moving parts, and I guess because
Yes.
I'm in traditional publishing and I see all the different departments and people that feed into a book. And then I think if I wanted to be a self-published author, I would have to be all those departments in one. So like how do
A
you
lot.
that's so much minutia. How do you even
Yeah. How
I
do
don't
you
even
keep
know
it all
how to
together? I mean, it's just a lot. I'm
I
amazed.
I thrive in organized chaos, so that helps.
Okay.
But especially right now, there are so many companies that are coming out with new things to help with doing different aspects. For example, social media was really hard for me for a long time, especially because I learned that my process, I can't market heavy and write heavy at the same time. So, like the first half of the year is when I write all of my books. And then the second half of the year is when I'm marketing and releasing all of my books so that I can divide that mentally and I'm not having to do it consistently. But for example, I started using Social Bee, which has been great because it feels too hard for me still to go into a social media scheduler where I have to schedule it for each individual day and each individual time slot on each individual social media. That's too hard. And even most of the other ones that you could find, you still have to do it every single day and every single time slot. And when I discovered Social Bee, they let you create folders and you decide what you want the folders to be. For me, my folders are like my reader engagement posts, my book engagement posts, and then I like to talk about other authors' books as well that are my comps because I'm a very strong believer of other authors are my comps, they're not my competitors. And so I like to talk about my comps as well. And I also have another one because I know a lot of the tropes that I use are people who like anime and Eastern dramas as well. So that's part of my audience's hobby. And I enjoy them as well. So I also talk about that on my social medias, but things that are comps for my books. And then on Social Bee, they let you create one time and you can move things, but like you only have to do it once. And you put what folder you want to post on what day out of a 4-week calendar at what time. And then as you dump all of your stuff that you've made into there, like into the folder, you never have to schedule anything and you just mark which ones you want to go to what social media that you've connected to it. And that's it. It does everything else, which is
wow.
amazing. It
It's really nice.
simplified my times in such a great way. Learning that I can't upkeep a PA street team. I can't upkeep a newsletter that's going to be weekly. And just letting myself be okay with that and walk away from that
Mm.
was great. My
Yeah.
street team, I dissolved and I let them know, I was like, hey, just FYI, I'm turning this into a newsletter that you are going to find out when myself and my friends have ARC and PR opportunities. And that was it. That's the only time that my old street team ever finds out. It's the only thing they ever get. Like I said, there's a lot of new companies that just recently are coming out with a lot of things to help. Brian Cohen quarterly does Amazon ad, like a free Amazon ad course. And it's great because it's a 7-day thing. And every single day you get to be part of the class and everybody's helping each other. And his expert team come in and they help people get feedback. And you're literally setting up Amazon ads with everybody, building it. And then you can use the
Wow.
same process for Facebook ads. So that was a really nice, helpful thing. And that was part of why I started Evergreen Author Resources with DC Gomez and Tanya, because we realized that there were so many resources we wish that we could find that were free or that were affordable for authors, because there's a ton of courses that are like, spend hundreds of dollars on me and you have no way of knowing
Sure.
if it's going to work. I
Yeah.
got tired of paying for ones that weren't going to actually help me or that were done by somebody who didn't understand what it felt like to be small. They assumed you had all of this money or that you had an audience already. And I was like, this isn't helping me at all. So
Yeah.
that was part of why we decided to start it, was we wanted to start creating these resources in an accessible way for authors.
Mhm. Wow. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
My brain is just like
I know. I know. I
writing
have so
its
much to go.
to-do list and
My one-on-ones with clients are like that sometimes. I joke with them because I do author coaching. and they'll come up and they'll talk to me and they'll be like, okay, I want to schedule you for 30 minutes. And I'm like, you're going to need more than 30 minutes if you're wanting me to really figure out what you actually need. Podcasts are different, but when I'm working with my clients, I'm like, schedule like at least an hour or two, because sometimes it takes a while for me to figure out what you're actually needing. And then I'm going to leave you with a bunch of resources and we're going to go until you start to glaze over. And then you just come check in with me. Like, I'm not an author coach that I'm like, we're going to check in. And they can message me, but I'm like, we're not going to have a call every month or every week. Like, I'm not that kind of author coach. I'm the one that I'm like, I'm boutique. You're getting a whole bunch from me all at once. And when you complete that checklist, come back and we'll do your next like round.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like you are full of information, a wealth of information. I'm sure your clients really appreciate it, and I know we appreciate you sharing all of this with us today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Really appreciate it.
It was fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.